I stand between you and dinner. It's just a few minutes, I promise. What goes through your mind? What do you think about? Do you reflect on the why, the what, of when we rise and face towards Jerusalem for prayer? It happened again about 20 minutes ago, reflexively, powerfully. As we entered Tefillah, those of us able to do so stood and focused ourselves towards the east. The Talmud anchors our practice of turning in that direction, not only towards Jerusalem, but more specifically towards what was the temple. We read in Masechet Brachot this description of what was, even then, a long-established custom of directing prayer towards the Temple Mount, regardless of where one stands in the world. Nimseu kol Yisrael makavunim et libam lemakom echad. All of the people of Israel were found focusing their hearts toward one place. One standing in prayer in the east turns to face west, and one standing in the west turns to face east. One standing in the south turns to face north, and one standing in the north turns to face south. All of the people of Israel are found focusing their hearts toward one place, the Holy of Holies in the temple. These words encapsulate a tremendous yet elegantly simple act of creativity, written after the destruction of the Second Temple, when there's no there. The temple is in ruins. Israel is not an independent nation. And as Jewish communities continue to spread throughout Europe and to Asia, and in time far beyond, rabbinic innovators made something out of almost nothing through an intentional act of focus, of kavanah, of directing the hearts and minds of a dispersed people towards a single location. The rabbis of the Talmud ensured that there was and is a there, a focal point for Jews living around the world, a temple of the imagination that enabled each and every Jew to project onto or into that charged, sanctified emptiness their longings, their self-image, their dreams. What's more, as far-flung Jewish communities built their own temples and created local customs and proved the adage that there is more, many more than one way to be Jewish, the practice of turning during prayer towards what had been the site of the temple created and continues to create unity. It binds us together while upholding our worldwide diversity. We pray as one. Nimseu kol Yisrael mekavunim et libam lemakom echad. It is an amazing, meaningful practice. And it is truly remarkable that after at least 1,500 years, here we are, Jews, living in Silicon Valley in 2022. We find ourselves turning our bodies and focusing our hearts towards that one place when we pray. I love and value this practice. But during these past weeks when I have prayed, I have found myself focusing on both the meaning of that place, the Temple Mount, and the meaning of this practice for Reformed Jews. My recent considerations of this custom were spurred by news reports from late January that Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett was retreating from a stated commitment to a 2016 agreement forged with progressive Jewish leaders to implement a plan that would give official status to the reform and conservative movements at the Western Wall, at the Kotel, through the creation of an egalitarian prayer space. Yielding to pressure from his ultra-Orthodox coalition partners, Benjamin Netanyahu froze the agreement in 2017. But with the recent change in administrations, we had hoped that finally this new government would take meaningful steps to fulfill its obligations. Instead, on January 28th, when asked about the Kotel deal, Bennett backtracked, saying, "This government cannot fulfill everyone's wishes. Not all of our dreams will come true. But I want diaspora Jews to continue their efforts to feel that they have a home here in Israel." When the Kotel agreement was reached in early 2016, we celebrated the feeling of having a home. This was going to be a major step forward in the arduous process of achieving full and equal recognition of Reform Judaism in Israel. At the time, the URJ issued a statement that included these words: "This new section of the Western Wall will become a beacon of enduring religious freedom and progressive Judaism. This agreement makes the statement that there is a place for all of our people. This new egalitarian, pluralistic prayer space gives us hope that if we can live our Jewish spiritual diversity in that holiest of places, we can and will, one day soon, make the entire state of Israel a place of religious freedom, tolerance, and respect." The URJ's statement echoed these well-known words from Isaiah: "I will bring them to my sacred mountain and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Ki beiti, beit tefillah, yikareh lechol ha'amim. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples." The name of our congregation is encoded in this verse: Beit tefillah, lechol ha'amim, a house of prayer for all peoples. Beit Am, that's what we are, a house of prayer for all. And for centuries, through an early rabbinic innovation, in the absence of a physical presence, an actual temple in that location in Jerusalem, our conceptions of what could be created there, a place for all to pray, were only limited by our imaginations. And yet, the predominant expression of this act of imagination, of what could be, is most often articulated as a desire to restore the past. As we chant in our liturgy, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem, renew our days of old. Or as the words in the Orthodox version of the Amidah state, have mercy and return to Jerusalem, your city. Build it now, in our days and for all time. Re-establish there the majesty of David, your servant. Praised are you, Adonai, who builds Jerusalem. This is liturgical nostalgia. For why does a house of prayer for all peoples, a space where all may pray, why must it reflect what we imagine the past to have been? Why cannot our conceptions of this sanctified space in Jerusalem reflect our present and future? Why shouldn't what unfolds in our Beit Am, the egalitarian prayer and liturgy that we practice here in the hills of Los Altos, why should it not be reflected by what occurs there at the Kotel, bathed in the pinkish light refracted by Jerusalem stone? Before 1967, it was likely easier to imagine an inclusive, egalitarian, sanctified space of prayer for all people in Jerusalem. But after the Six-Day War, the Kotel was placed under the authority of the Orthodox rabbinate, which has continually governed the site and enforced the rules and customs of an Orthodox synagogue, separating men from women, preventing women from reading Torah and from leading services at the wall. Consequently, and as many of us have experienced, the closer we get to what is considered the holiest site in Judaism, the harder it is for us to pray. For there at the Kotel, our commitment to religious pluralism and equality, demonstrated most effectively and heroically by women of the Wall. These expressions of our Jewish practice are met not only with derision, but also with violence perpetrated by other Jews. On the 6th anniversary of the Kotel Agreement, this past January 31st, the URJ called on Prime Minister Bennett to implement the agreement and said, "In a time of intensifying political and religious polarization, such bold action would long be remembered as a Solomonic solution, teaching all Jews the power of compromise and unity." This morning, as they do monthly, women of the Wall celebrated Rosh Chodesh at the Kotel. As Rabbi Rick Jacobs, the president of the URJ, recounted in an email that many of us received, MK Rabbi Gilad Kariv used his Knesset immunity to bring in a Torah, which was then read by leaders of Women of the Wall. According to Rabbi Jacobs, 10,000 Orthodox women and girls protested against them with hate-filled signs and harsh chants. The Haftarah for this week's portion, Pikudei, introduces a very different type of gathering than that one, a celebration that may have once occurred in pretty much the same place as this morning's conflict. In the Haftarah, we read of Solomon's dedication of the temple, but it is what happens next that may provide us with inspiration, with hope. For after the dedication, after the numerous sacrifices made to God, we read in 1 Kings chapter 8 that Solomon and all Israel with him, a great assembly, Kahal Gadol, which had gathered from throughout the land, they celebrated the feast, Hechag, to Adonai our God for 7 days. On the 8th day, the people said goodbye to the king and returned to their homes joyful and glad of heart, smechim v'tovei lev, over all the goodness that Adonai had shown to God's people, Israel. May this image of unity, of all Israel feasting together in that one place, may it inspire our eastward prayers, and may it inspire our continued advocacy for the creation of a sanctified space, a place of prayer in Jerusalem, where we all may live our Jewish spiritual diversity with gladness, with joy. Shabbat Shalom.